Welcome to episode 94 of the Sports Marketing Machine podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Neisser. Today, I sit down with KC Smurthwaite from Athletics Admin. He does fractional support for universities all across the United States, specifically helping connect fans, alumni, and donors while driving revenue. We talk about what that all looks like, some things that have worked for some organizations, where trends are going. We also dive into his jersey program, how it works, and how it's raising a lot of money for universities. So without further delay, here we go. KC, welcome to the podcast. Excited to dive into all things athletics, athletics admin, and all the fun stuff you're involved in. But first off, thanks for coming to the podcast.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me. It's a great day. Anytime we can talk a little bit of sports, a little marketing, hey, that's a win.
Absolutely. All right, let's before we dig into some of the cool stuff that you're doing, high level, what is Athletics Admin? Why did you create it? What's the mission? How have you been helping organizations?
Great question, Jeremy. And I think it starts with, in my career, I got a chance to get into collegiate athletic administration very early. I was a washed-up college baseball player that got a meeting with the head coach, the athletic director, and then HR was in the meeting invite. And I always thought it was kind of funny that the HR person was there. I'm thinking, hey, I'm just going to get cut. Why does HR need to be there? But no, it actually turned into a job opportunity that they wanted to allow me to get my hands dirty early on at an age because they knew that I wanted to work in sports. And so I joke that I've gotten a paycheck from almost every external area in an athletics department, from ticketing, even facility ops, game management. Some people say that's more internal. I see it both ways, but obviously everybody sees the fundraising, the marketing, and the fan engagement and external piece. But in every step of the way, I've been able to get my hands dirty, and I credit being a washed-up college baseball player at 19 and having an athletic director who saw something and said, hey, here's an opportunity, run with it. So as I kind of got into my career, I always saw holes, gaps in the industry. And as time progresses, and now we're in that NIL age, there's a lot more gaps, and there's a lot more questions than answers. And I always struggled, especially when I was a one-man shop during COVID at Southern Utah University, head of external, having my hands in a little bit of everything, plus overseeing men's basketball. It was just me. I had a couple others, part-time and other full-time employees, but they were doing their own thing. So keeping that ship going, I had to churn outward to a couple other organizations, and I always struggled with even my limited budget when we would sign off with some of these companies that had this massive retainer fee, trying to solve one problem, and then they were also taking a cut from X, Y, and Z on the revenue side. And so I always in the back of my mind just went, man, why can't it be flipped? Why can't it actually be focused on the student athlete and not necessarily about the revenue? Yes, look, you and I both, we want to make a career. We want to be able to pay the bills. I get that. But I think especially now with NIL and the revenue shares looming, there's a lot of questions. So what Athletics Admin is a group of individuals who have worked in higher ed, the academic side as well as the athletic side, and we're solving problems. We want to be problem solvers, not problem creators. And that's from, creating a game experience with doing a jersey program, or an athletic director calling and saying, look, I have something I can't get to, but it's probably a 3-month project. Can you do blank? And it's, fill in the blank right there, and then we're gonna go in and we're gonna attack it. And especially with some of the projects we do, we're cheap. I get that. I've even had the industry leaders tell me, hey, you're way too cheap. This isn't scalable. Good luck. Well, that was still a couple of years ago, and we're still rolling. We're still having fun. And at the end of the day, I think the difference between us and maybe other contractors or consultants is they're a little more hands-off. I want to be hands-on. I want to get to know your team. I want to get to know who they are, know what makes them tick, and then we can start getting some good energy building towards some good answers instead of more problems.
Sure, sure. So what's an example of a project that a athletic director, you don't have to tell me the university if you don't want to, but what's a project that an athletic director came to you and said, hey, this is on my list. I just simply can't get to it. We know this is important, but I've got all these other things in there that are just top priority. What is an example of some of the things that you've worked on recently?
Yeah, great question, Jeremy. I think a big one's all around revenue.
Mm-hmm.
It's we have an asset, or we have an annual fund, or a major gifts program that needs to be developed, or our annual fund is outdated. Can you come in, survey, get to know a little bit of our fan base and donor base? We'll send out surveys. We'll sit down face to face. I've even flown up and drove to campuses to sit down with some of these donors, corporate partners, and ask them. And I think that's a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily a problem. I think that may be a little too harsh. It's just something that's overlooked. That we sit in meetings and we talk about, I think our fans or I think our donors would want it. Why not ask them on a large
Mm-hmm.
scale? Send out a survey. Let's do some data information and not just go off of a pulse. So instead of grabbing a full-time employee to kind of take multifacets and creating a survey, it's going to be us. Then we're going to take that answer and then we're going to create an annual fund, or we're going to create like a give back program for former student athletes, or we're going to start to build out a framework of a major gift society, or an NIL project. One that has been a big hit, I would say, and it's on the verge of exploding. And you can blame me. I know other people who are working with me blame me, say, hey, why are you holding this back? I want to make sure it's done right. I want to make sure it's a good program. But it's our jersey program.
Mm-hmm.
We're going in. We're creating a game experience hand in hand with the marketing and athletic administration in order to get fan engagement and drive some revenue.
Well, there's nothing better than the tease. We'll definitely talk about the jersey program, but I want to go down the rabbit hole of the annual fund drive. All right, so I work at a university. We have an annual fund drive. We're trying to raise money. These are typically donors 10 grand or less for most mid majors. It's kind of in that range, maybe a little higher, maybe a little less, but let's just approximate here. So you may come in and you've got a small staff, but they're trying to scale this, trying to reach as many people as possible. So how do you tackle this while providing them with the right support and helping them drive revenue while kind of staying consistent with what they're trying to accomplish? What does that all look like when you're kind of walking in the door? You've set up a project plan, you're obviously meeting with the staff and what have you. What does this look like?
Yeah, and I like to ask the question of what does success look like to them?
Mm-hmm.
What's the expectation here? Because what might be an expectation or a win on our end might not be a win for them. And then we're working completely different and separate than what they were initially hoping for. So I think coming out with those 3 to 5 quantifiable goals.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about the annual fund, the annual fund, that's a gateway drug.
Yep.
That's it. I mean, and you can even scale back another gateway drug are, alumni events.
Mm-hmm.
It's look at your ROI. How much are you spending on your alumni events or even on your annual fund brochures? What's that ROI? And can we tweak it? Can we make a few little changes here and there? And I love it. It's just I don't know about that, or can we? Well, let's just test it out, because guess what? If it flops, you can blame some random consultants and contractors who work in their basements, across the country. You can blame us. And that's an easy win for them. You can blame us. But spoiler alert, we've had a lot of success with some of these, little litmus tests. Let's dip our toe in the water and maybe adjusting the annual fund program to maybe include a little bit more of, swag, or a little bit more interaction with student athletes or even coaches on the front end. And I think it's also bridging the gap between the athletics department as well as your alumni association. There sometimes there's campuses out there that are very decentralized, and for those who know that jargon, you get it.
Yep. They don't talk to each other.
They're living in their own world. They are They are in the same city. They are on the same campus. They are a quarter mile away from each other, maybe if less than that.
Yep.
And they don't know what's going on because they don't talk. Now, there's pros and cons to both, but what I'm getting at here is I think one of the things I love to bring up is when we set those expectations of what does this look like. Oh, are you trying to build out a major gift program, or are you trying to, move people along that, progression in the fundraising program? Is what's your relationship like with your friends on campus?
Yep.
And, there's something about collegiate athletics, professional sports that breeds egos.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the time, I hate to admit it, it's like, well, they're always saying no to something.
Uh-huh.
But I think part of it is I think you just got to sit down and talk to them
Mm-hmm.
and explain it. This is a side note going off on a tangent here, Jeremy, but I also teach as an adjunct at a couple institutions. But in my ethics course that I teach at Utah State University, one of the steps to basically an ethical dilemma is, ready for this? This is mind blowing. Is to talk to the other side and just see where they're at and ask
Mm-hmm.
them those open-ended questions. Isn't that crazy that we're
Yeah,
teaching
just
that?
yep.
Right? Is
Uh-huh.
Well, can we sit down and talk to them? Can
Mm-hmm.
they understand from our lens, and can we understand, more importantly, what their lens sees? Because their lens might just be, oh, you guys just pay all this money and all, we're done. Oh, well, that's always not the case.
Mm-hmm.
So I think setting those quantifiable goals, understanding what their ultimate goal is, and then let's work backwards to what success looks like to make sure at the end of the project, we're all giving each other high fives and we say, hey, let's keep that momentum going.
Yeah. So staying on the topic of the fund drive, typically, just like you said, that's the early entry. That's the in the marketing world we call that the tripwire, right? That just gets you in, right? And eventually we're going to turn you from this to this. In the ticket sales world, we turn you single game to mini plan to season and so forth. And this one here, if we can get you to donate $50, $50, we're going to see if we can get you eventually to do 100, and 100 turns to 5, right? Eventually, that's what this looks like, a fund drive. So if an organization comes to you and says, hey, here's what we've done in the past, which used to be legal. We used to tie tickets to donations, sit on the floor. You had to do this. And now it's like they don't want to do it that way. We want them to put money into the NIL collective. Like it seems like this is just moving plates on a table here of where the money's going. But what's the best way to set something up? And I'm not asking for free advice, but when you think about it,
Hey,
like
that's fine. Go for it.
what's the goal here? The goal is here to raise money and support and enhance our student athletes. Should it be specifically tied to things, or it's all based on the goals of the university, right?
Mm-hmm. And it starts at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And no problem on the free advice, because guess what? Fans always give free advice to
Yep.
athletic directors, even sometimes consultants and contractors. That's fine. That's part of it. We want
Mm-hmm.
them to be part of the team. We want them to feel a part of the process. And I think that's why you have some of these annual fund programs, is that you get that interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Major gift program. Let's call it what it is. Some of your top level donors who are really funding 70% of whatever project it is, they could probably buy everything or anything that they wanted to.
Yep.
Those little things that they can't buy, or those little things that they can't buy for access, are those leverage points.
Mm-hmm.
Or getting that news 30 minutes before that press release goes out. Starting to develop a little trust. Hey, we trust you on this. We got some conference realignment news. We're going to be moving over to this conference.
Mm-hmm.
Please keep it between us. That's going to get the people salivating. That's
Sure.
the kind of information that, guess what? It costs nothing
Mm-hmm.
for you to tell somebody in like a trust or a trusting platform or whatnot some of that information. So, when you look at your annual fund and the development into the program, it's what are your assets that you have that either A, you aren't leveraging,
Mm-hmm.
or B, you are leveraging, but can we squeeze it out a little bit more?
Sure.
Can we add that next level? And not to go too deep, but I posted about this on LinkedIn, and I've never really talked about it out loud, in this type of setting, is something that Coach Todd Simon, who's now at Bowling Green,
Mm-hmm.
did while at Southern Utah University. We were growing in our fundraising, and this is the example to answer kind of the part of the question of, how do we grow? How do we get there? And
Mm-hmm.
it starts at the top. And Coach Simon wanted that men's basketball program to grow,
Mm-hmm.
both at the start of the NIL, annual fund, and major giving program, because there are some lofty goals for his program.
Sure.
And it started at the top with getting and talking to the president, getting the AD on board to understand that vision. Okay, and then when we turned into Coach Simon, it was, what are some of these assets that maybe fans ask for? Okay, gear. They always want what the coach wants.
Yep.
Okay. B, they want to know the game plan. And it was crazy to me. This is all Coach Simon, and I've got to give him props on this. Is for our high-end donors at basketball, he would print out on select games the scouting report. The strengths, weaknesses of the opponent, of the players, their names, and what the emphasis of what the players are.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to kind of that game plan, that scouting report, understanding who we are and what success looks like. Now all of a sudden, I kid you not, it was the coolest. I'm getting goosebumps right now. You would see our on-court donors knowing the scouting report and reminding players, he can't go left, he can't go left, hands up. And it was just like, it all of a sudden, you had that fan engagement in the game. They're not in the game, but they felt like it because they knew the scouting report.
They do something that no one else did.
Yes. And then all of a sudden it's going. But guess where it needed to start? It needed to start at the top. And it also needed to explain to the athletic director, hey, we're giving out our scouting reports on opponents, just as an FYI. That took a little bit of, I mean, as a sport administrator, I even had hesitations. I'm like, ooh. I mean, I'm all for getting money in, but coach, do you really want that out there? And it was complete trust, never had an issue, and he still does that today on select games. He even had a newspaper there while he's at Bowling Green to be able to kind of get that peek behind the curtain. But going back to the overall scope, it starts at the top. Get everybody understanding what success looks like and the steps to get there.
So where do you see this all going? Because over the last 10 years, NIL has exploded. The legislation has changed how donations should come in. And we're just talking from a donor perspective. And this could be also correlated to ticket sales and sponsorships and what have you, where people are like, I'd rather do X instead of Y. So where do you kind of see this going?
If I truly had that answer, I think I would end up being in a much different position. But Jeremy, this is where I think it's going. And I think you're going to see a time and a place where college football is its own entity. It's operating even outside of the university and becomes more of an affiliate to the university. I think the dust needs to settle, but I still think we're years away from it because we still have, I think I read it was somewhere between 32, 36 states that all have their own NIL, rules and regulations. Now, here come July 1, I think that's going to there's going to be some more federal aspects to it, which will help tremendously. And I know, they were kicking the can down the road for a long time, but there is a major juncture right now. You're hearing super leagues, you're hearing about transitions from FCS to FBS, and you're hearing about universities that are needing to put in $100 million of donors' money into athletics. Now, mind you, those are also campus donors because nobody graduates from athletics.
Correct.
So there's going to be a timer and a place where I believe football breaks off and does their own thing. And they will become an affiliate to the university. They're going to be able to become more self-operational, and what that looks like for other sports, for even your men's and women's basketball, I don't know, because I think a lot of things have to happen in that place. But we're just getting to a point where we have some answers, but it's starting to paint a picture that shows that one thing doesn't belong with the other, and that's collegiate football, even with the NCAA, or even collegiate football with the institution. They are on completely different paths, and I think that's going to get to a point where they break away and do their own thing.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating topic to think about that eventually this could evolve into almost something, two different entities, but they're represented with the same colors and the same brand name. So such a fascinating topic. And I think the NIL as a whole was the Wild West, and people are trying to put kind of block guards, but naturally people are trying to find gray areas to sneak through, and states are doing legislations. But I think one of the biggest takeaways is if universities haven't set up their own collective, like numero uno, project number one, they need to do that, because that's how some donors want to support the university, is they want to see the teams win.
Correct. And they look at it from an investment standpoint. It's everybody. I mean, I was just reading this morning about Ryan Smith and what he's been doing and building in the state of Utah. And I live basically on the Nevada-Utah border, and so from afar I see it, but also kind of in my backyard. And just reading about it is, you kind of think, man, that would be awesome to be an owner of a sports franchise. And Jeremy, you're nodding with me.
Yep.
It would be really cool to own a sports franchise. But now let's pull NIL into this a little bit, okay? NIL gives the chance for the common man or common woman to be a part owner in a way of a sports program.
Mm-hmm.
If they have $50,000 and they want to buy a player, I mean, let's call it what it is.
Sure.
Made. They want to get that star point guard in the portal. They want to help coach out. Hey, that's my guy. I'm going to fund that. You now have a little more ownership. I mean, it's a lot different than that ownership of that donor that's courtside that has the scouting report on the kid that can't go left.
Yep.
But with that, it's giving the ordinary fans who have some discretionary income more a piece of the pie, more ownership. But there's a dark side to it, Jeremy, and I've seen this already happen with a couple of schools that I have really good relationships with. Is that the player flops or the player gets hurt? I mean, that's no disrespect, that happens. But now it's like, hey, wait a second, I paid for this. It's just like a normal season ticket holder.
Correct.
Who had high expectations on the season, buy season tickets, the team falls flat, or the star quarterback, shooting guard gets hurt on game one. And it was centered around that individual. So there is definitely a dark side to it all.
Yeah, an example is that a UNLV quarterback who's transferring after a few games, and there's some loyalty, and I kind of feel like we're headed down a path as if these athletes who are accepting NIL are signing a contract that specifically states you must do X, Y, and Z, and if you do X, Y, and Z, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, like that's going to get really, really messy really quickly. But let's shift gears. Let's start talking about this jersey program. We talked about it a little bit, teased it a little bit. I think it's is so cool. I come from the minor league baseball world. Hockey's done this as well, where they take jerseys and kind of come up with some different ones, but you've got a different take on this.
Yeah, I'd say it's talking about lenses. I look at it from a different viewpoint, and I even talked about earlier on athletics admin, and when I was an employee, understanding that coming to the realization that I am paying somebody else to help me do some of my work, a retaining fee, and then they're taking a cut of the revenue brought in on some of the things that probably would have come in anyways, but I just didn't have any other help. And so I kind of took that model and I flipped it. And I take that along with this idea that I had it forever of the minor league approach. And I love it, NACTA or NACMA, whatever. Everybody talks about, oh, you got to take a minor league approach. Y'all don't. We don't.
Correct.
Don't. There is nothing minor league about 90% of the schools in Division I, and I'd even extend into maybe even Division II that do minor league things. Now, so it kind of take it back at my time at Southern Utah. I tried this at Utah State. It actually was denied. Came to Southern Utah. This idea was denied again and again, and then finally had a little window of an opportunity with the VP of marketing on campus, and she was awesome. She was a great ally, and what's kind of funny talking about lenses, there was an MO about her on she doesn't really get athletics. When I sat down and talked to her, she got it. She actually had great questions that maybe she just didn't understand. But as I kind of talked to her about my vision, all of a sudden I had to then sell the athletic side on it. And I ended up going to my athletic director and saying, here's my credit card. I have $1,000 from campus who are willing to do a retro game with our ugly colors. And we're going to sell those jerseys after one game. And the questions were like, again, why are we doing this? It just makes no sense. Jerseys for one game? People are going to buy this? These are ugly jerseys. And that's some of our hard-earned money, that's a risk. So what athletics admin's doing is we're taking on that risk. It's the same concept. And, spoiler alert, we made close to $35,000, $40,000 off of those ugly jerseys that fans coming out to the game, season ticket holders now just saying, hey, when are you having that game next? Hey, can you expand that to sports here and there? So in short, what we're doing is we're working with some of these athletic departments saying, let's either look back, make a futuristic game, a retro night futuristic game, or you see it in the NBA and MLB, City Edition, City Connect jersey. I've got an awesome designer that has been a just tremendous asset. And we put our heads together with the institution on marketing and say, what's the game you want? Let's plan ahead. This isn't something you throw together at the last minute. Let's plan ahead. Let's create a really cool jersey that's going to elicit emotions and let's build a theme night around it. And oh, by the way, we're buying the jerseys.
Mm-hmm.
We're zero hard cost to your institution, your budget, your athletic department. And I think that's the kicker.
Mm-hmm.
We're not making you do it and then we're celebrating on the back end. Now we're going to do a revenue share.
Mm-hmm.
Majority of it's actually going back to the institution, because I think it's really fun for the student athletes to see that really cool jersey, that really unique idea. And from a 70-30 rev share standpoint, they're going to get 70% back. And if they want it to go to NIL or they want it to go to the scholarship fund, but there are so many other avenues in this jersey program that I think some other schools are starting to figure out. It's engaging former student athletes, a tough crowd to give back. They've already done their time. They've already put their blood, sweat, and tears. Now all of a sudden they have some discretionary income, and they start to see that their logo or their name across the chest of the school that they went to is there. Like, then the pocketbook comes open. They're like, that's what I recognize. And on a modern feel, like, yeah, I'm going to buy a t-shirt from the bookstore, because guess what? We try to collaborate with the bookstore. We try to collaborate with a merchandising partner. We have a couple, one definitely in particular that helps us out with this. And then we start selling merchandise. We then, in the game, these fans are engaged from in the arena to, I've even seen somebody from Auckland, New Zealand, to Nova Scotia bidding on these jerseys while the game's happening. They feel like that they're attached and connected back to the university that they were just there with. And then, licensing, merchandising, and you can get really creative with this. But it's also led to corporate partners for that institution to say, hey, when are you doing that game again? Because that game all of a sudden has value.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, we're taking the risk. We're in the risk business.
Yeah, I love this idea. So you reach out to a university. Let's just choose one, Northern Iowa. So let's choose them. They've got an old vintage logo that they want to kind of have some fun with. Maybe they're doing an alumni night at a basketball game, something like that. The guys are going to wear, the men's basketball team's going to wear the jerseys. You're going to set up. You're going to buy the jerseys. Obviously, you're going to work with them on what the jerseys look like. They approve everything. You're going to get them the jerseys ahead of time. You're going to set up the auction site so people can scan in on a QR code, do their bids, donations. So you're collecting email addresses, you're collecting donations, you're collecting all the bids, you're doing all that work. All they need to do is promote it. They promote it to their alumni. They promote it to all of their ticket buyers. They promote it out as much as they can. And then at the end of the game, they kind of have to operationally get the jerseys from the people. The people come up and they pay, show that they paid. You give them the jerseys and they're good to go, right? So they have to handle a little bit of the operational side of it. But at the end of the night, they may walk away with 30, 40, 50 grand, depending on team, location, what have you. Like, this is a win-win-win for everyone. It gets your alumni back fired up, something else to talk about. They're raising money. It's kind of unique and kind of gets some buzz going, which in some cases, like, this is a unique idea that just might ignite some things. So I love it. I think it's awesome.
It's fun. It is fun, even when we're in the think tank going back and forth on emails of, what we like, what we could do. Right after this, I'm pitching another institution, and it's fun to go back through their game programs and their, those old cartoon designs they'd have on game programs, and I'm finding all this stuff, and it's really fun. And we have our own auction platform. I mean, I don't know if I mentioned that. We have our own auction platform that we use. It's really good. I'm not going to say that it has all the bells and whistles of live stream, X, Y, and Z,
It's not eBay, but it works, right?
It's not, but it's a really good platform that, doing 20, 30 of these, we've never had a problem. It's been great. Fans get their information, and we give that information back to the institution when they can all go back and say, oh, Donald Stark, he bid $2,100. We can't even get that former track and field star $100. But he's willing to do this, for a little give and take. And then we're adding that more data, and more, the analytics aspect of, okay, so maybe they're giving ceilings a little bit higher. But yeah, on the auction platform, it's all straight from their phone. It goes to a website, they bid. After the game, we can run the cards right then and there, and then we do ask that the institution, fulfills, the mailers, or come pick up at the ticket office. Generally speaking, we want them washed, and it's kind of crazy to me that I never really thought shorts would be very popular, but the shorts are usually kind of the best sellers. Right? I've learned something new too.
Mm-hmm.
Because before I was like, we'll let the players keep the shorts. And then after the first couple times we ran this, everybody, the feedback, hey, spoiler, send a survey out. People are like, hey, can we get the shorts? Like, okay, well,
Yeah, well,
I get,
sure.
we will.
Mm-hmm.
So it changes nothing. We work with the institution and their apparel partner. It's not like an athletics admin branded jersey.
Mm-hmm.
If they're Under Armour, it's going to be Under Armour. If it's Nike, it's Nike. Adidas, New Balance, and so on and so forth. And again, going back to the win-win-win, it's $0 really for the institution because we're going to pay it up front. And then we're going to work towards that reimbursement of that number, and then it goes into that rev share.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, knock on wood, we've never lost money on it. There's been more successful ventures than others.
Sure.
Don't get me wrong, but I love the question that sometimes when I'm pitching some of these schools is, well, what happens if it flops? Like, hey, then you had a great theme night that fans will remember and that your players loved.
Yep.
And,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you just it works both ways, and you guys just don't get as much of a revenue as you thought. But I think a lot of it comes back to, and it sells itself. But you got to promote it a little bit. You got to put those little QR codes on the seat backs.
Mm-hmm.
I'll fly out or have somebody else fly out if they don't have somebody who can do that. Haven't ran into that yet, but I'm doing one for a couple of schools actually here in a couple months. I've never stepped foot on their campus, and I'm excited. A couple I will fly out to because I've never been to those campuses, but in theory, I'm going to be doing for sure one that I've never stepped foot on their campus, and we're going to make them a couple $1,000s for a fun theme night.
Yeah, I think that's such a great way for the universities. And I don't see a lot of universities going so far right to the minor league model where it's extremely goofy and silly. There's somewhere in between. I've gotten trouble from running minor league-esque promotions as I was an employee at a university, and it's like I got my hand slapped, got in trouble for some of these things. So there's a fine line, but I think this is definitely something. There's low risk, high reward, great opportunity to connect people, great information. It's a win-win-win. I can see that this eventually would expand to something bigger. So basketball is a great one. Eventually, could this expand to football? Could this expand to volleyball? Could this expand to a lot of sports? I'm sure the answer is yes, but we're just beginning with the basketball side, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it can. And I think those revenue shares will look differently depending on the sport. And, there's a couple schools that this spring, and they are a little smaller, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little scary for me, but I also want to know the litmus test. I want to figure it out. Going back to even at the beginning of, when I talk to some athletic folks, it's like, I don't know. Let's find out.
Mm-hmm.
Let's find out so we're not always wondering. So when somebody asks me, hey, have you ever considered doing it at a D2 school or something, I can go, hey, you know what? I actually kind of did it at a D2 school. It was basically the same size, but it was a D1 school. Yeah, we have this data. And you give me a couple weeks. We have had a couple of pitches for football. We have. There's been some interest. And like I said, I've kind of held it back a little bit because I want to make sure we're doing this the right way, because I think it could be something very special. And we have to work in collaboration with the licensing and marketing and trademarks on college campuses. That's it. That's a guarantee. We're not going rogue. We will work. We'll talk to them. I've spoken to them. I used to be, an LD, a licensed director for the campus. So I can speak that academic side. I can speak that licensing side. I've also been threatened multiple times from individuals who hated the idea that, the brand police were going to come arrest me because I, put a Santa Claus hat on top of the logo for a Christmas thing. Like, okay, I'm happy to say I've never been arrested by the brand police.
Yep.
I'm easy to find. They can come arrest me. But at the end of the day, it's going back to that student engagement, driving those tickets and that revenues, doing something fun. And it's really easy to get lost in it, especially for a retro game. You go back, going through your archives. You go back, see how ugly some of these things were. But also, retro's in.
Yep.
Retro is selling. And, we wish that we could have done like a cool retro, intro video. Well, that's fine. Just put a filter in black and white over it and change the music into some sort of disco, depending on the generation. Done. You're fine. And that took 5 minutes. But we're having a lot of fun. We are expanding. We actually have done women's volleyball and soccer. very much, we're not as out there as I think we should be in a way. But again, I'm holding us back. I want to make sure we're doing it the right way. I think we're going to get some good litmus tests, knock on wood again, to see how the football looks. Because, it's not 15 to 20 jerseys. It's, now 85 to 100.
Yep.
And I'm curious to see how it plays out. But for right now, we're having a lot of success. We're designing some really funky and fun uniforms that's getting fans, players, student athletes, donors, and even myself excited. Like I get excited as well, and I hope you feel the energy that and passion I have for the student athlete experience. And I'm not gonna say this. There's a really, really good record of teams wearing our jersey in men's and women's basketball.
Superstitious aside.
Yeah. I'm not going to disclose the record, but it's really, really good. Some might say a clean slate.
There you go. So, curious question here. Let's talk basketball in this jersey idea. So there's a lot of universities who have basketball coaches extremely well known. We've got Damon Stoudemire at Georgia Tech. There's a lot of these other guys who are extremely well known from who they are, or where they came from, or their coaching style, Calipari. Like, there's a lot of those. Do you do anything for the coach so that the coach is wearing something? Because I presume you can get some good dollars out of that as well.
Yes, a great question, Jeremy. It's something we've done a little bit. We've offered, and sometimes the coaches, they don't want to be seen wearing some of the stuff. Some coaches are, I'm not going to use the word better, but are a little bit more open to the idea more than others, because fans want what the coaches wear. I think what we have seen is in warm-ups, also doing the long sleeves, but also like the managers and maybe the assistant coaches, because sometimes the head coaches, they want to make sure that they're wearing their suit. We want to do something for them, and if that opportunity's out there. Coming up in January, we did the first ever, and this was another idea that I was just grateful that an athletic director was willing to say yes to, because it was another idea I actually had right on the, we had the yeses, but then COVID hit. And it was the first ever fan design contest for a uniform. And so the University of Hawaii, we did it with Hawaii. I collaborated with UniWatch and Phil over there and Paul. And we had hundreds of submissions from all over the world. And we came up, we selected and let the players get involved in the process. And it was a fan-designed uniform with kind of an alternate logo. Theme Surf City, because it kind of has like a silhouette of a surfboard off the side. And yeah, some people were hey, I know that's kind of ugly, why are we doing this? But for the most part, there's been a great feedback. And one of the things that we're doing and it is the coaches are going to be wearing something.
That's
the
cool.
Coaches, I've never hit the order form on it, so hopefully they ordered it, but that's something that is on them for that aspect, because that's actually something the coaches wanted to do, and we said, yeah, go for it. I think it just helps build the experience, and that jersey looks good, especially on that cream vanilla. Ooh, it is good. That student it was a student in Colorado who designed it. I mean, he did a great job, and there were some awesome submissions.
That's cool. That is cool. So if a university is interested about this jersey program, has some questions, just want to have a conversation with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can Venmo me. They can check me. No, it's an email. It's casey@athleticsadmin.com. It's athleticsadmin is how it's spelled. Casey is K as in King, C as in Charlie, and or find me on Twitter. And or just type in Google Athletics Admin or Crazy Jersey Guy. I'm not sure if that will pull me up, but I think it's a great program. I think it's fun, and then reach out, or they can reach out to you, Jeremy. And I think you have my contact information, or maybe you're deleting it after this podcast. But feel free to contact one of us. We'd love to collaborate and just have a conversation. It costs nothing to collaborate. In fact, it costs nothing also to buy jerseys in this program, because we're buying them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the idea. I think it's such a great way to connect the city, the alumni, raise money. It's a win-win-win for everyone. I'm going to put your contact information in the show notes. So if someone clicks through, if they say, "Hey, I heard you on the Sports Marketing Machine podcast," just treat them right. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, you know what? I'm going to roll out the red carpet, and then we're going to tell some Jeremy jokes. Just spoiler alert.
Well, I'm a dad and I've got great dad jokes. So whenever you're ready, happy to hook you up with those whenever you need them. So it's all good
Sounds
stuff.
good.
But I love the idea. It's always great talking athletics in the university, raising funds, where things are going, what it all looks like. And then, of course, this Jersey program, I think is such a fascinating idea because you just see this in minor league sports, Major League Baseball, even now the NBA's doing it. And it's like, all right, we can replicate this without offending the brand, offending the university. And I think if done right, when done right, everybody can make some money. So I think this is such a great way for everyone to kind of get involved and continue to expand their brand. So I think it's awesome. But I'm going to put your contact in show notes, and we'll definitely keep an eye on what you're working on and continue to bounce ideas back and forth about different ways universities can raise funds, get more people involved.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeremy.
My pleasure.